Jon Jones called us last night and retired. Jon Jones is officially retired. Tom Aspinall is the heavyweight champion of the UFC.
Jon Jones has retired. And with that announcement, flat, curt, delivered by Dana White at the tail end of a post-fight press conference, the most complicated, chaotic, and confounding career in MMA history supposedly came to a close. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. Not for him. Not for the youngest champion in UFC history. Not for the man who was supposed to be the Michael Jordan of MMA. The one who would rise above all debate and stamp his name in the annals of history as the greatest to ever do it. Jon Jones was meant to make the GOAT conversation boring. He was destined to be the final chapter, the one name you couldn't argue against. And for a while, he was.
I feel like Jon Jones is the most dominant fighter of all time.
Jon Jones to me is the most accomplished fighter we've ever seen. Like the things accumulate over time.
But then something happened. Yeah, most recently, this guy happened and made Jon Jones disappear. So if you want to rock this Aspinall T2 or any of your favorite fighters, use code TFB with the link down below for 5% off your order. But Aspinall wasn't the beginning of Jon Jones' downfall. It started way earlier than you think. Things just started to happen. The DUIs, the drug test, the cancellation, the hit and run, the steroids, the lies, the arrest, the victimhood, the pulsing picograms, domestic violence. It kept descending, spiraling, breaking, until everything but one certainty was ash.
I truly believe he's one of the best to ever do it. Micro ones are loving to death. He is so honest and unbiased. Dude, like, how are you gonna say Jon Jones is one of the greatest of all time when he's fucking failed the drug test?
Multiple times.
Multiple times.
This is the story of the most talented fighter to ever step foot in the octagon. A protege who could have been the greatest without question, but couldn't stop getting in his own way.
I've sworn to protect the citizens from people like you, Mr. Jones.
Someone whose legacy, despite all the belts and all the wins, is now a cautionary tale wrapped in wasted potential.
Whatever happened to Jon, man?
Jon is a problem to his own self, his own damn self. I'm empathetic. I'm a human being, you know.
For sure, yeah.
I'm like, man, what a waste. What a waste of potential.
Jon Jones has retired. And if that sentence doesn't feel like closure, it's because it isn't. When Jon Jones first became champion, all the way back in 2011, he sat in the middle of the octagon and soaked it all in. Right there and then, you knew you were watching someone very special. Joe Rogan himself said it best. Jon Jones might be the greatest talent in UFC history.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is the future. And he might be the greatest talent that we've ever seen in the UFC.
He was absolutely right. Jones was 23, already a champion. He was technically a rookie in the game, but had absolutely decimated a veteran in Shogun Rua. He had all the attributes to be the greatest, not one, but the singular greatest mixed martial artist of all time.
Bones Jones went out and proved that the hype is real. He really is that good, that gifted, and that talented, and we have a new light heavyweight champion.
Young, talented, physically gifted, blessed even, but most importantly, mentally sane and laser focused on achieving even more glory, the proper way. His eyeball obsession was a little concerning, but aside from that, there were no red flags. I mean, the guy had just stopped a robbery the same day he became champion.
Spanish couple, like screaming. He just broke my window open. He took all my stuff and he's running. I told our driver, I'm like, dude, take care of my stuff. I threw it on the floor and I just started running. Just kicked him from the back, like kind of kicked his ankle out. And he fell down, and when he fell, he like, scraped his hands up pretty good. We hold him and the police come. The police had told her that I was fighting and everything. She was like, God's gonna be with you tonight, man. You're gonna do good. God bless you, son. I'm gonna watch your fight. And I was like, thank you, man.
See? Despite achieving fame and success at such a young age, and so much more yet to come, our inevitable GOAT still had a good head on his shoulders. There's no way he would get into trouble. You would never have to worry about him getting into DUI or anything.
You never have to worry about me in a DWI. I think I'm a good company guy.
Well, that didn't take long. You could forgive this as a freak occurrence, but around this time, Jon Jones was in a very personal rivalry with his former training partner and former friend, Rashad Evans. Nowadays, Cormier is the one credited with exposing Jon Jones, but in reality, Rashad had called him out years before that. This part in particular means a lot in hindsight.
My favorite is
You're
fake.
fake.
Tell me how my fake, Rashad.
I'm not gonna get into that right here. But
Okay.
I know. I see you in life.
Why
You can sit up here. You can sit up here and put on the holy, John, I'm this and I believe in this and that. But I see you in life. I see you in life.
This feud wasn't as intense, but those who saw the interview, the more hardcore fans, started feeling a little bit differently towards Jon Jones. Before the Evans fight, he had choked out Rampage Jackson and Lyoto Machida, two long-standing fan favorites, and he was cheered. But when he walked out to defend his title against Rashad Evans at UFC 145, Jon Jones was the villain, and there were a whole lot of people in the arena hoping that he would get his ass beat. But Jones won the fight pretty dominantly and rewrote the narrative. Rashad was speaking from a place of bitterness. Much of what Rashad said was forgotten, or rather dismissed, because hey, Jon Jones was a winner, a massive winner. His good guy facade was a bit exposed, but at just 25, 26 years of age, Jones was already considered the greatest light heavyweight of all time. He had a few issues pop up from time to time, but the light heavyweight GOAT was still on track to being the best there ever was. He had dealt with the old guard of 205 with little to no difficulty, and now he was up against a new generation of light heavyweights. Spoiler alert, he remained a winner. But this is where the fall from grace truly began, and two fighters in particular had a massive role to play. At UFC 165, Jon Jones faced Alexander Gustafsson, who was the first title challenger to actually match him in both attributes and youth. Jones had 5 title defenses, and he was expected to run through Gustafsson, but that night, he met his match. Or almost. For the first time in his perfect career, Jones was not just pushed to the limits, but he was battered, bloodied, and spent the rest of the night in the hospital recovering. Looking back, if that elbow in the 4th hadn't landed, we might have heard NU that night. Jones rallied back in the championship rounds, and his performance answered a lot of lingering questions about his grit and mentality. He isn't the type to roll over and quit. When you push Jon Jones, he will stand his ground and battle back, head on. At least inside the Octagon.
It was an amazing fight. I think it was the greatest fight we've ever seen.
Well, Jon Jones is the greatest fighter in the world right now, pound for pound. And tonight he set a UFC record, defending his title at 205 pounds for the 6th consecutive time.
The war between Jon Jones and Alexander Gustafsson was hailed as the greatest light heavyweight title fight of all time, and in the immediate post-fight press conference, Dana White was already open to a rematch.
I think that fight was awesome. I think this is one of those fights that people would love to see again, and yeah, and it'd be hard for either one of the fighters not to think they both should rematch.
Not only was it entertaining, it was that close, and I think they wanted to push the narrative that finally Jon Jones had found a worthy rival. The fans wanted to see the rematch. Dana White was looking to book it ASAP. Gustafsson obviously wanted another shot, but Jon Jones had no interest at all. Once upon a time, Jon Jones ducked Alexander Gustafsson. This doesn't get talked about much because at one point, the rematch was scheduled for UFC 178, but Gustafsson pulled out. But for a while, Jon Jones and the UFC were at odds regarding the rematch. Jones had a warrior mentality inside the Octagon, but if he could help it, he wasn't keen to get into anything too risky or dangerous to his legacy. That perfect record mattered a lot to him. He had other stuff going for him too, and being undefeated was a big part of who Jon Jones was.
I'd like to give an apology to the MGM Grand and all the fans, all the kids who saw that.
So fake.
Hey, are you still there?
I actually admire that you can actually be this fake, and like when the TV comes on, how you can just change. You're the f***ing scum of the earth. You are a terrible human being, but you can sure turn it on, huh?
This is still going live.
When you say live, like who can hear it?
Going up to the bird. It's out in the air.
Oh, so people can use this?
Rashad had pointed out his obvious fakeness, but he still held back on fully exposing him. Cormier, on the other hand, didn't give a crap and called him a phony every chance he got. The crowd was firmly on DC's side because all that Jones had done up until this point, the minor stuff, eye pokes, oblique kicks, and major blunders, sinking UFC 151 and his random outbursts on Twitter, had added up, and he wasn't just a villain at this point, he was one of the most hated personalities in the UFC. Jones' title defense against Cormier at UFC 182 wasn't as competitive as the one against Gus. Cormier definitely held his own, and he wasn't steamrolled, but it was a clear 49-46 with Jones outworking the king of the grind and out-wrestling the Olympian. I gotta say, the Jon Jones that showed up at UFC 182 was uniquely scary. Yeah, he was probably on coke and steroids that night, but he was also supremely motivated and focused, and even at the end of the fight, it looked like he could go another 5 rounds.
My lips swollen, my eyes fat. It was a 5-round fight. It was entertaining. You know, he had some great flurries in there,
And as an athlete, how can you not respect a guy like that?
Maybe he recognized that Cormier was an actual threat, or he just hated him. Maybe both, but at the end of the day, whatever Cormier had babbled about in the build-up amounted to jack shit, because once again, Jon Jones had won when the pressure was unreal and the entire MMA world was against him. And when he walked out of the cage after the 8th successful defense of his title, he was already considered by many the greatest, with no asterisk next to his name, and the real scary part was he was just getting started. That said, hold on to your seatbelts now. This one is going to get nasty.
With new trouble this morning for a mixed martial arts champion. UFC star Jon Jones turned himself into police overnight after leaving the scene of an accident where he crashed his car, injured a pregnant woman.
Yesterday, he appeared in court and was later stripped of his title by the UFC and suspended indefinitely.
In hindsight, Cormier probably wasn't Jones' greatest rival inside the Octagon, but in many ways, he was his contrast. And for a narcissist like Jones, that's someone even worse. Before Cormier, Jones was seen as someone slightly annoying, arrogant, and an occasional rule bender. After Cormier, Jon Jones was seen as a narcissistic, sociopathic, and deeply conceited train wreck whose only redeeming quality was that he had never lost. UFC 182 was the turning point in Jon Jones' career, because since that point on, it was loss after loss for Jon Jones, and every single one was self-inflicted. After the hit and run, Jon Jones was stripped of his title, and he was away for more than a year. He remained absolutely radio silent for a couple of months, but then he started appearing in interviews, a seemingly changed man who had grown a lot. He was saying all the right things, and he appeared to be doing okay.
You know, I can be a fuck up at times. You know, I can struggle with drugs and alcohol just like anybody else. At the end of the day, I believe, you know, Americans appreciate, respect a good comeback story.
I'm on a mission to prove to the world that you can get back on your feet after almost anything if you don't give up on yourself.
Absence make the heart grow fonder. That's what they say, right? So when Jon Jones eventually made his return, he was welcomed back like a hero, while Cormier, the light heavyweight champion, was booed like he had tested positive for cocaine or something.
I've been sober. I haven't done all these things. I haven't wrecked my vehicle. I haven't been suspended. I didn't get stripped from my championship. You cheer this guy for saying he's not going to do these things anymore. I have done this my entire life, but you boo me.
Well, I guess it was fair to give Jon Jones a chance. This was his first major fuck up, and he seemed to have matured from the experience. And despite Cormier holding the belt, Jon Jones was still the lineal champion and the best light heavyweight on the planet. His comeback fight more than a year after UFC 182 was against OSB, and he won the interim title at UFC 197, setting up a massive unification bout versus Cormier at the biggest UFC card of all time, UFC 200. In 2016, this was a massive, absolutely fucking massive clash. Not only were two of the top pound-for-pound fighters who loathed each other going to clash in a unification bout, they were going to close out the single most important UFC pay-per-view up until that point. This wasn't just a title fight on International Fight Week, it was a war between two opposing forces at the very pinnacle of the sport. And considering Jones was in the right place now and past his demons, there was absolutely nothing to worry about. We were getting the biggest fight of all.
Come on. I know, bro. Fuck, I'm so sorry.
Jon Jones, potentially the best of all time, failed a PD test. This wasn't just an asterisk. This was a disease he was going to carry on his legacy forever, and the timing couldn't be worse. UFC 200 was reduced from a once-in-a-lifetime card to a really average one. UFC 151 being cancelled was a reason to hate him, but this was a crime against humanity. And I can promise you, he cried for himself, not for any of us. So he was now a sociopathic narcissist fueled by coke and empowered by roids, but at least he was still winning. Well, not so much anymore. At least, not enough to override the ever-building backlash.
I don't consider myself to be a bad guy. I've done some bad things, but I strive to be a good person.
Following his failed drug test, Jon Jones spent another year on the sidelines, tweeting Bible verses and blaming his drug test on dick pills. Initially, He was going to face a 2-year suspension, but USADA ruled that while he tested positive, he took the contaminated pill unintentionally. He was given a 1-year suspension instead and made his return, fingers crossed, in the summer of 2017. Daniel Cormier, the guy who was booed mercilessly before, was still the champion, but Jones didn't get a hero's welcome this time around. Fans were not happy with Jones for ruining UFC 200, and it almost felt like UFC 182 all over again, with every single person in the MMA world hoping and praying for Cormier to humble Jon Jones. And unlike last time, Jon Jones was at a disadvantage and the momentum was on DC's side. Away for more than a year, more rusty and under intense scrutiny by USADA, Jon Jones was more vulnerable than ever. If there was a time and place for him to fail and burn down, it was the main event of UFC 214. But god damn it, he got away with it again. You couldn't even nitpick about this kind of result. Yes, he was rusty and under the eye of USADA, and yet he still went out there and beat Daniel Cormier, not by decision, but by a brutal KO, something you cannot unsee or reason against. He came back after a year and knocked out a generational talent and regained the title he had never lost in competition. Jon Jones was also gracious in the post-fight interview, and humble, and surprisingly sane in the press conference. We had heard this same routine from Jones time and time again, but this guy was at the worst place in his life not too long ago, and had made his way back to the top. After losing everything, building yourself back up piece by piece, and returning to who you used to be, people usually become more humble, cautious, and careful. They learn, or forced to learn on how to avoid the same mistakes and pitfalls. And looking at Jon Jones, we were finally on a redemption arc. But in true Jon Jones's fashion, the guy fucked up when everything was perfect. Yet again.
You know, I beat him fair and square the first time and off of steroids, and I beat him the second time off of steroids. So,
And I'm glad you're here, DC, because Jon Jones tested positive for turinabol from a sample the day before your guys' fight, of course, at UFC 214 in July.
It's brutal, you know. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. I'm sure I feel the same way every one of you felt when you heard.
What should happen with Jones now?
Look, first of all, I agree with Dana. Jon Bones Jones is the best I've ever seen. And I thought certainly he had the potential to be the most accomplished. It does not look like that's going to happen right now. It's just arrogance, and that arrogance is his hubris that's undone what could have been the greatest MMA career ever. I agree with Dana. It could be over for him.
UFC 214 was a disastrous night because not only did Jones KO Cormier, a result you just cannot look away from, but he also tainted his legacy forever, this time for good.
One last thing, and maybe you can't talk about it, the supplement that Jon took, did he disclose that to USADA?
I'm not going to talk about the exact facts from the case.
Okay, so
right.
Overall you guys came away fairly happy?
We're satisfied with how the evidence came in, and we'll wait for the decision.
You could buy his excuse of tainted dick pills, but testing positive for turinabol, an anabolic steroid, during the most important fight of his career, the truth was obvious for anyone with half a functioning brain. But of course, Jon Jones and his team had their own dumb narrative to sell. Jon Jones was once again a victim of a contaminated/tainted substance, and he was completely innocent. Someone was out to get him, and Jones was so afraid and careful that he had stopped eating at restaurants.
That's steroid. So I have to defend Jon on that. There's no doubt something got in there somehow, but it's scary now. Jon's even scared to eat out. He's scared to eat away. He says, gosh, what if that waiter doesn't like me, if the busboy doesn't like me, you know? Who knows what's going to happen out there? And it is kind of scary that way if you think about it.
What a bunch of bullshit. USADA didn't give a fuck about their conspiracy theory, and they were looking to impose a 4-year suspension. If that had happened, it would have been the end of his career. So Jon Jones entered into an agreement with USADA in exchange for providing, as per the report, substantial assistance to USADA. Jones would be granted a reduction of 30 months from his proposed suspension. In simpler terms, Jon Jones snitched. And according to Malki Kawa, the most underrated contender for the slimiest MMA manager ever, he snitched on himself.
If you've never done any of this stuff, how do you have information to provide in the first place?
That's my point. There was none. But I keep saying that, and everybody keeps running with it. Substantial assistance doesn't necessarily mean it had to be on somebody else. It could have been on themselves.
More bullshit, but I'll move on from this. Instead of a 4-year suspension, Jon Jones was given a 15-month suspension, and a lot had changed. Upon becoming a heavyweight champ, DC had vacated the light heavyweight belt and moved up, and after 18 months away, Jones returned from Twitterland, and I'm sure the UFC hated him, but the 205 division was wasted, so they had no choice. The main event of UFC 232 was set, Jon Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson 2 for the vacant light heavyweight title. This rematch was years in the making, but better late than ever. On December 29th, the last pay-per-view of 2018, business would be settled, and what better place to conclude business than the fight capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. Wait, what do you mean it took place in California? Oh, killed UFC 151, ruined 200 before it actually happened, tainted the aftermath of 214. But this was next level. Originally, UFC 232 was set to take place at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, but Jones kept failing drug tests. From what I recall, he failed a half a dozen pre-fight drug tests, and this is where USADA shat the bed too. Normally, USADA was strict and made no exceptions to the rule. If you tested positive, no matter the circumstances, you were done for a while. But when it came to Jones, USADA attributed the failed drug test to a pulsing effect of the turinabol he took.
Number one, both USADA and worldwide anti-doping experts told us that this was not a re-ingestion of this prohibited substance. And number two, probably more importantly,
he retains no athletic performance-enhancing benefits from the small presence of this substance.
So after years of being dormant, the picogram of turinabol gained consciousness that Jones was about to fight and start pulsing to sabotage him. This was such a complete shit show from start to finish. Jeff Nowitzki was the mouthpiece and preached about Jones' innocence every chance he got. Jones was regurgitating the same stupidity about pictograms in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, but the biggest victim in all of this was Alexander Gustafsson.
Assume we know nothing. You're fighting in LA, not Las Vegas. He just popped for a metabolite, which all the experts say you couldn't possibly take the amounts that Jon Jones, it's impossible to even take the amount that he's popping for. So just so we're clear here, this isn't about me, and it's not about keeping the fucking fight on. I'm gonna have a fight either way, and I don't gotta go to fucking LA. But it's not fair to you, and it's definitely not fair to Jon either. He didn't do anything wrong. We have every expert on fucking earth saying he didn't do anything wrong. So the fight should happen.
The fact the UFC decided to keep the camera rolling during this discussion is one of their dirtiest moves to date. Even if Gustafsson wanted to say no, he couldn't, because the onus of the event falling apart would be on him. And who do you think he is? Jon Jones? Who can sink an event and ruins months of hard work and still go to sleep? Nah, the fans got screwed over pretty bad too, as the decision to move the card from Nevada to California was made in a couple of days, so a lot of plans were ruined, and the disdain from the fan base was obvious. This rematch was supposed to be grand, and the UFC was supposed to end the year on a high note, but UFC 232 was marred with stupidity, controversy, and shamelessness. And in the main event, Jones beat Gus via TKO and became the champion once again. Whatever. In 2019, Jon Jones did try to remain active. He beat up on paper hard Anthony Smith, and that was a slight return to form. He came back a couple of months later to defend against Thiago Santos, who was a former middleweight. Now, you know what Jones usually did to middleweights, but Santos did pretty well, even with his legs crippled. For the first time in his career, Jones was taken to a split decision by a former middleweight who had busted his legs early in the fight. That was a bad sign. After so many years of being on top, Jones finally looked to be slowing down a tad. He took a little bit of time off and returned in February 2020 against Dominic Reyes. Reyes had gotten the title shot off of KOing the corpse of Chris Weidman, and he was largely untested. Jones, despite the lackluster showing against Santos, was a big favorite to win. February 8th, 2020, UFC 247. I don't care what you say. Jon Jones lost that fight, and he knew he had met his match.
And it was in round one. He hit me with like a spinning back kick to the face, and then he punched me in the stomach, and I hit the floor, and it was technically a knockdown. And he was giving me a true fucking run for my money. He was the only other person to do it to me outside of Gustafsson. And I remember thinking to myself, you may have met your match, Jon. And something just as clear as that other voice said, fuck that.
I also don't know what the judges were smoking when they gave the decision to Jon Jones, but trust me, he knew the end was approaching. By this point, he had burned nearly everything down, but he still had, at least on paper now, that unbeaten record. When he came this close to defeat against Reyes, Jon Jones realized that the end was near, and the one thing holding his career, his legacy, his life, was the fact that he had never lost. After the Reyes quote-unquote victory, Jon Jones went on a Ducking Masterclass. He had no intention of rematching Reyes, and he vacated his belt, opting to sit on the sidelines and tweet away about his bulk up to heavyweight, something he had promised to do all the way back in 2013. The sport moved on fast, and Jones, with his public feud with the UFC and his Twitter obsession, wasn't doing himself any favors. Jones tied his name to the most popular heavyweight around that time, Francis Ngannou. Francis was popular just because he killed people inside the Octagon, but he was also in a very public and bitter feud with the UFC. Every week or so, Jones would call out Francis, then blast the UFC for not meeting his monetary demands, and tweet dumb for the rest of the day.
I'll quote him and what he had said to my lawyer. Told my lawyer he wants what Deontay Wilder was paid. I think it was $30 million. It's fun working out in the gym in the morning, seeing tweets from Jon Jones saying I'm lying. It's not like I can't prove what I'm saying is true. We have text messages from him, but I'm not going to do that.
Supposedly, his long-awaited heavyweight transformation, a process that was apparently so delicate and sacred that it required nearly 3 years of pure inactivity, constant Twitter battles, and zero accountability. But it wasn't just his fighting career that went dark. In 2021, the UFC finally did something fans had long demanded. Jon Jones was inducted into the Hall of Fame. Not as a fighter yet, but for his legendary war with Alexander Gustafsson at UFC 161, a fight that remains to this day one of the greatest ever inside the Octagon. So the honor was fully deserved.
It feels really cool. It's been a long time since I've gotten any type of awards or anything like that. And this is a different feeling. And I'm very honored, very grateful. I feel more established in a way.
It should have been a proud moment and a legacy milestone. Instead, it turned into the setting for his darkest crime yet.
Metro Police, Flores 18405. How may I help you?
Hey, this is Eduardo with Caesars Palace Security. Domestic violence call. Female is bleeding from the nose and mouth. She's down with us while the male is up at the room. And he's actually a professional MMA fighter, Jonathan Jones.
Just hours after being celebrated by the UFC, Jon Jones was arrested in Las Vegas for domestic violence. According to police reports, he had assaulted his fiancée, the mother of his children, leaving her bloodied. She reportedly ran to hotel security and begged them not to let him back in the room. His daughter asked them to call the police. Let that sink in. This wasn't about PDs or eye pokes or failed main events. This wasn't even about the sport anymore.
Tell us about what Jon is going through right now.
So at about 5:45 a.m. Friday morning, just hours after he accepted the induction into the UFC Hall of Fame for his fight against Alexander Gustafsson, Jon Jones was arrested in Las Vegas at a resort on the Strip and Flamingo Road. And the charges are domestic violence, battery, and tampering or injury or the injury of a vehicle, which is actually a felony charge. Jon Jones is currently in the Clark County Detention Center, and he has a bail of $8,000, and he's still there, and he's supposed to appear in court on Saturday at Las Vegas Justice Court to face those charges.
Jon Jones blamed it, of course, on alcohol, as if a hangover justified the trauma. But this was the final proof. Proof that Jon Jones wasn't just flawed or immature or unlucky. He was rotten. At his foundation, he was deeply, dangerously broken. This was no longer a cautionary tale. This was a case study in self-destruction, entitlement, and the harm that gets left behind when nobody ever says enough. And yet, the story isn't over, because Jon Jones would return once more. After years of exile, silence, and speculation, he finally came back, but not when the world was demanding it, not when the competition was at its peak. Nope. He waited and watched and calculated, and only came back when the storm had passed and the road had been cleared for him. It wasn't a coincidence that his return was announced shortly after Francis Ngannou, the scariest man alive, the reigning champion, the true king of the heavyweight division, had walked away from the UFC due to a contract dispute. Now, with Francis gone and the belt vacant, he finally found the courage to act.
They have also said that I'm scared of fighting Jon Jones. Sounds very ridiculous, in my opinion, with all due respect, because I've been calling for this fight for over 2 years. I've been waiting for this fight forever. The only thing that I'm scared of is to be trapped. You guys know how the UFC contract can be restrictive. I can't do that.
and the UFC welcomed him back with open arms. After all the chaos, controversy, and criminal behavior, the company was still willing to promote him as the face of the sport. His opponent would be Ciryl Gane, a supremely athletic striker with undeniable talent, but also, crucially for Jon, a man whose ground game had been publicly exposed in his last fight.
It's going to be exciting to see how Jon Jones handled the footwork, the lateral motion. Is he going to go for a takedown? Is he going to try to, work on what is perceived to be Gane's weakness, which is the ground? It's a lot of questions being answered, and it's going to be exciting to find out.
For all his finesse on the feet, Gane was a baby deer when it came to grappling, and Jon Jones, whether on PEDs or not, was still one of the most dangerous wrestlers in UFC history. At UFC 285, the fight lasted barely over 2 minutes. Gane threw a few kicks, Jones closed the distance, secured the takedown, and submitted him with ease. Just like that, after 3 years away, Jon Jones was the heavyweight champion of the world. But it was never just about winning. It was about rewriting the narrative. One last time.
Oh, yeah, baby. Y'all want to see me beat up Stipe? One thing I know about the UFC is we give the fans what they want to see. Stipe Miocic, I hope you're training, my guy.
Jones stood in the octagon that night and called out Stipe Miocic, not Sergey Pavlovich, not Curtis Blades, not Tom Aspinall, or any of the top contenders who were working their way up the ladder. He wanted Stipe, a 40-year-old part-time fighter who hadn't competed in over 2 years, someone who had already been brutally knocked out in his last fight, because Jones didn't want danger. He didn't want uncertainty. He wanted the perfect legacy matchup, and the UFC obliged, announcing Jones versus Miocic as the headliner for UFC 295 at Madison Square Garden. But then, like clockwork, Jon Jones pulled out, and the fight was scrapped. The card was in danger, and once again, Jon Jones had derailed an event, and the company scrambled to save it.
I got the results.
What is it?
You're out 6 months to a year. You gotta go have surgery.
You're lying.
I swear on my life, full tear.
It was Tom Aspinall who stepped in to save the night, knocking out the fearsome Pavlovich in spectacular fashion and claiming the interim title. A new era had seemingly arrived, a fresh face, a dangerous, humble, likable champion who had earned his way to the top. But Jon Jones didn't care. He refused to acknowledge Aspinall and refused to recognize the interim title. He refused to do what every champion before him had done, defend the belt against the next in line. Instead, he stuck to his demand, Stipe or nothing. And the UFC as always bent to his will, because I don't even fucking know.
Is Jon Jones the pound for pound GOAT?
He's the pound for pound best fighter in the world, and he's the GOAT, and you all know this. Numbers don't lie.
Does he have pictures of you?
Jones had seized control of the division, not by fighting the best, but by manipulation, leverage, and empty promises. He held the entire weight class hostage, dragging it behind him as he waited for UFC 309. And when that night finally came, Jon Jones once again got what he wanted. Stipe Miocic stood across from him, a shadow of his former self, aged and inactive, and Jones made easy work of him and left the cage as the undisputed heavyweight champion after an admittedly brutal spinning kick to the body. On paper and UFC certified the greatest of all time, but in reality, something far more hollow. There was no sense of completion or resolution because this wasn't a conquest. It was a pre-planned and carefully coordinated glory design in advance. The path had been manufactured, the danger had been removed, and the division of the baddest dudes in the world had been frozen in time. What made it worse was how shamelessly he clung to the belt after.
Tom Aspinall's the nicest guy on the planet. He never disrespects Jon. He says nice things about Jon. What specifically has he said or done to make him an asshole?
Buying a little duck and just the little shit that he does. He's annoying to me. If I give him the opportunity to fight me, I want to be so compensated. I want to say it. I want that fuck you money. That's just what it is.
While fighters like Aspinall were wanting the opportunity he was once given as a 23-year-old protege, Jon Jones offered nothing in return. No timelines, no updates, no intentions of defending. He refused to pay for the opportunity that had once defined his own rise. He denied the very cycle that allowed him to flourish, because deep down, he knew the truth. A loss now, just one, would unravel the last remaining thread holding up his legacy.
We expect one more rodeo.
I don't know what life holds as far as fighting. And so right now, I'm just focusing on love, happiness, kindness.
Because Jon Jones has burned every bridge behind him. He has lost the respect of fans, peers, and mentors alike. He has tainted his career with steroids, scandals, and shame. He has committed crimes that go far beyond the realm of sport and blamed every mistake on something or someone else. And through it all, the only thing he has clung to, the only thing that made him bulletproof in GOAT debates and Twitter threads, was that spotless record.
What would it take to fight Tom Aspinall from the UFC? Like, what does the UFC got to do?
Said something real wild on off the cuff. I'll see you guys later.
That's it.
Yeah,
right.
Thanks for the happy
Jon
beer.
Jones.
It didn't matter how many failed drug tests popped up. It didn't matter that he was arrested more times than some fighters compete. It didn't matter that his biggest wins were increasingly against carefully chosen opponents. That weird loss by DQ early in his career didn't count, and as long as that undefeated aura remained, Jon Jones could still stand tall in the GOAT conversation, because in a sport that brutalizes body and erases legacies in seconds, being undefeated, technically, is kind of an armor. But deep down, he knew, we all did, the moment the record was tainted, the barrier would break.
He said you got 10 years left, but you're still active. I'm done.
And perhaps that's why, after months of posturing, after ignoring Tom Aspinall's every call-out, and refusing to acknowledge the present-day heavyweight division, Jon Jones did the only thing left in his control. He retired. Not in the cage, not with a glove left in the center of the octagon as the crowd stood in applause. The most talented fighter the sport had ever seen retired over the phone, and this was announced in the middle of a post-fight press conference through the words of Dana White.
Jon Jones called us last night and retired. Jon Jones is officially retired. Tom Aspinall is the heavyweight champion of the UFC. The fight was done. We had the fight done a long time ago. So why he decided not to fight, you guys will have to ask him that.
Is it fair to say he was offered a lot of money to take this fight?
Yeah, listen, he was offered what he deserves.
A legacy that began in brilliant fireworks ended with annoying static. He had demanded more money to fight Aspinall, made it clear that nothing less than fuck you money would tempt him into defending his title against the interim champion. And for once, the UFC didn't budge. They called his bluff. And instead of doing what legends do, facing the challenge, proving it once more, or leaving it all in a cage, he backed out.
Well, that's one thing I love what you said, that you have to pay it forward. Meaning, like, you got the opportunity, right? A young athlete coming and fighting an older guy, Rooster Shogun. So circle comes around, now you have Tom Aspinall, and here you are, you're 38. Now you give the young lion the opportunity to take out the old lion.
Yep. And then the Tom Aspinall fight comes about, and he's like, give me 30 million. Thinking like, it's gonna be my way of
getting out of it, but not really. Yes. I learned that from my father-in-law.
Okay, here you go.
Yeah.
There's 30 million. You gotta fight the guy, man.
No final performance, no resolution, no passing of the torch, just a call, a headline, and silence. And now that the dust has settled, with all the controversy, all the chaos, and all the second chances counted, I can say this with full clarity. Despite everything Jon Jones accomplished, what a waste. Since 2015, an entire decade nearly gone, he's only stepped into the octagon 8 times, and every single one of those appearances has been stained by something: a suspension, a legal case, a last-minute scandal, a drug test, a hollow opponent, or what could have been. He was the chosen one, the generational talent, the one who could have brought finality to the GOAT debate, who could have stood as the Muhammad Ali or Michael Jordan of MMA. But instead, he retires as just one of the greatest. One of, not the. And that is the greatest tragedy of all. I know Jon Jones' retirement lasted a grand total of 2 weeks. The moment UFC White House was announced and the cameras started rolling, Jones ended his retirement.
I was retired. I felt like I was at a place where I've done it all in the MMA space, and felt like there wasn't too many more challenges for me, and I just wanted to do something more than championships and money. And Donald Trump mentioned that he wanted to have a fight at the White House Garden, and this is my act of I can't call it service, but just to be able to entertain the country and the world at this level at the White House, it just means the world to me. So I'm back.
Just like that. Another return, another resurrection, another chapter in a story that refuses to end cleanly. But seriously, do we really want to go through this again? This has been exhausting. For over a decade, Jon Jones has held the sport hostage with his brilliance, his chaos, and his contradiction. Every comeback is temporary, every apology is rehearsed, and every setback is framed as sabotage and God's test. And yet, somehow, we keep watching. He's not just a generational athlete. He's a narcissistic, sociopathic superhuman who could have been our undisputed greatest, but he needed to be adored, feared, obeyed, and most importantly, undefeated. And now, as he flirts with another comeback, he does so with the entire MMA world rolling its eyes.
Would you be okay with him like coming back and potentially winning that belt again, and you might have to go through?
Well, it's not even about him winning the belt. I mean, you know how I felt about him. I can't risk putting him in big positions in a big spot and have something go wrong.
He may be rich, and like he often likes to remind randoms on Twitter, he may still be technically unbeaten, but he retired the first time with almost nobody cheering. Not the fans, not the fighters, not the media. No farewell tour, no legacy bouts, just contempt.
I see quite a few people in here calling me a duck. I'm a duck. It's funny that we really live in a world where being called a duck should affect me. Guys, come on.
And as much as he pretends not to care, flexing his wealth, posting Bible verses, and declaring himself as the greatest ever time and time again, he knows that his second act wasn't marked by triumph, but by toxicity, that the second half of his career has become ammunition in debates, and that no matter how many belts he has, the sport no longer sees him as the savior. It's not a loss on paper, but it's a fall from grace. And Jon Jones, behind all the noise, behind the Instagram filters and delusions of legacy, he knows it.